Hi, this past week I decided to buy a new bronzer and give it a try. So this is from the line Jones Road, which just came out with a new line of bronzers. And the shade that I picked was light tan. And while I think I can get some use out of this particular product, it was definitely different than what I was anticipating in terms of the shade. And this made me think a little bit about how difficult it can be to choose a new bronzer and how many bronzers I have in my own makeup collection that I haven't ended up using at all. And so what I thought that I would do today is to talk a little bit about why it is that choosing a new bronzer can be so difficult, and also to swatch the 30 or so different bronzers that I have in my own collection, so that perhaps, since I can do this in natural light, so that perhaps you can get a better sense of what the different options are from different companies and which bronzers might be appropriate for you. So all of these bronzers have actually worked okay for me in terms of not irritating my skin, and they also have worked okay for me in terms of their performance. So I'm going to be focusing mostly on the colors, but I'll also be talking about my experience with the bronzers in general, so that you can have all of this information to hopefully make a better choice and not waste quite so much money as I have wasted on this. Trying to find a bronzer that really matches your skin and that flatters you and that looks natural is going to be really a much more of a challenge in bronzers than it is, say, in foundations, because most companies offer many different foundation shades, whereas they're only offering a few bronzer shades. So what I've heard from a number of different sources, and I think this is probably true, is that when you get tan, that your undertone is going to remain the same. So if your undertone is on the yellowish side when it's the middle of winter, then in the summer your skin is going to be darker, but it's going to maintain the same kind of undertone. So if that is the case, then what you're going to want to be doing is to find a bronzer that has a similar undertone to what you have, so that it doesn't look unnatural. That's an issue, unfortunately, because for most companies, even though they may have a few different bronzer shades, usually they have only like 3 different bronzer shades for most companies. Generally, what happens is that those are just for like light, medium, and dark skin. And so if that's the case, then what you may find is that the undertone for the bronzer that they're offering is not appropriate for your own skin at all. So it may be too neutral, it may be too yellow, it may be too orange, it may be too olive colored. So therefore, it may not be the case that even if you particularly like a brand of makeup, that you are necessarily going to be able to find a good bronzer for you in that line. So for me, I seem to have a skin that's on the peach side, so it's not exactly neutral and it's not exactly yellow. It's somewhere that's a little bit more on the pinkish yellow side. The other issue with bronzers is that the way that bronzers are used and the way that bronzers are labeled may encompass a variety of different things. So for bronzers, what people may be doing, they may be trying to darken their skin overall, and I have done that with bronzers that I've used, where you're just trying to put on a very light layer of color to make your skin overall look a little darker. You may also be trying to add some dimension to your face. You may also want to be using a bronzer that's on the shimmery side and that's acting sort of as what I would call a bronzing highlighter. And all of those kinds of bronzers, even though they may have very different functions, they may all just be called bronzer. Now for me, I've tried a variety of different ways of using bronzers, and the way that I've found so far that has worked best for me is by following the instructions that a makeup artist named Gucci Westman has provided on her own YouTube channel. And Gucci Westman runs a company called Westman Atelier, which is a cleaner beauty product company that tends to be very high end. And so what she is suggesting is that a 2-step type of approach. So the first step, and she has lighter skin herself, but to use a powder bronzer to slightly darken the skin, so that it looks like you have a little bit of a tan, and then to use a more shimmery type of bronzing highlighter to add some dimension to the face. So here's a few bronzers that I have used that I think have worked well for me in terms of their being on that slightly darker than my own skin tone peach shade. And one of those happens to be the one that's offered for quite a lot of money, unfortunately, by Westman Atelier, which is this butter bronzer, which is $75. It comes in this unnecessarily beautiful gold case, which so far can't be refilled. Supposedly, eventually, they're going to be doing refillables. It's what's called a baked gelée, so it has it comes with these little hearts embossed on it. In the video, what I'm doing is using this Clinique shade, and this is a product that's called Powder Pop Flower Bronzer in the shade Solar Pop. And this is actually probably my favorite bronzer, even though I almost never use other types of Clinique products. For this one there, it does have a lot of artificial colors in it. It does have a little bit of shimmer, which I wouldn't necessarily be looking for, but I think that the shade is such a nice version of like this peach shade that my skin would turn into if it got a little tiny bit of nice even sun in the summer, that I really do like it. Another one that's been good for me, which is from a company that's no longer in business, is this one from Vapour. All of these are things that just add a little bit of very, very natural color to my own skin. Now, they may not work well for other people's skin, so it really depends on your undertones. Now, if you compare all of these bronzers to the new Jones Road product that I'm getting, then you can see that this Jones Road product is actually quite a bit more reddish color. It doesn't really have that peach shade to it. It's a little darker, and it's also just a little bit more brown and a little bit more kind of reddish Georgia clay type of a color. So this is something that when I put it on my face, the way that I do the Clinique bronzer by trying to brush it sort of all over the whole area, it really looks like I have a little bit of a sunburn. So therefore, if I take this and I put just a little bit on my cheekbones the way that I would a blush, then I feel like it gives me just a little bit of a hint of color. And then I might put a little bit of it over my nose. So if I use it the way that I would a blush, I think it can be kind of pretty. I just can't put on too much, and I don't want to put it on all over my face. Now, Jones Road is a company that I believe is more geared towards the needs of older women. So they don't exactly say this because nobody wants to be seen as a company that's only serving older women. But Bobbi Brown, who is the makeup artist who founded this company, she's 65 now. And so she developed most of these products because they looked good on her and they looked good on her friends. And I think that as people get older, that adding a little bit of pinkness to the skin that simulates the look of blood underneath the skin can be make people look much more youthful. And I think that in this case, that may be what they're going for here, that they're looking for something that's healthy looking and that's bringing a natural flush of healthfulness to the skin. The lightest shade in this line is definitely designed to have a pinkish shade to it. So it's for people that are very fair and that when they go into the sun, their skin more turns pink. So that probably is a fairly natural look for them, even if it's not necessarily what they're looking for. And for people that are a little bit darker like I am, then that tawny pink might be able to serve as a blush color. So I would be interested in trying that. Then there are three shades, including this light tan, that might be appropriate for lighter skin tones. So there's the light tan, what they describe as a lighter warm bronze. But the next one up is golden bronze or tan. So that one might be more peachy. I would be interested in giving that a try to see if that might be something that I could use as more of an overall product that would not look so red on my skin. And then there's one that's called medium tan, which is called a cool bronze, which is darker, but which might actually be a little more pink. And then there's three darker shades, which are for people with darker skin tones. Now, another thing that's happened as time has gone on is that in a lot of cases, bronzers have become more like blush, and blush has become more like bronzers. So, for instance, I have here a couple of shades of blush that are so muted and so appropriate for my own skin tone that I think that they work for me quite well as bronzer. This one's from Mineral Fusion, and it's in the color Pale. This one has just a tiny little bit of shimmer in it. And again, this I think works really well for me in terms of duplicating how my skin looks like on a good day in the summer when it's gotten some sun. And this one has a little bit less shimmer to it, but it is called Glory, and it's pretty much the same shade. It's from the company called Han, and I think this is a very nice company too. And this is actually also a good value, I think. And Han products in general are ones that I find to be very clean, to perform really well, and I really like this color in particular. Okay, so now I'll talk a little bit about neutral bronzers. So even though, very frequently people will suggest that on the one side there's cool and that's pink, and on the other side there's yellow and that's more golden or warm, and then in the middle there's neutral. I don't really find that to be very helpful because in my case I feel like the neutral colors are actually not working very well for me at all, and that what I really need for it to be a good matte for my skin is to have it be on the peachy side, and that if the products are too neutral then they just make my skin look muddy. So let me give you some examples of some bronzers that have fallen into this category for me. And there's been a lot of them, so I've wasted a lot of money buying bronzers that I thought were neutral, which would be appropriate for me, and that turned out not to be. So for instance, this one is from Tarte, and it's from their Saie line, which is sold as clean at Sephora, and this is called Breezy Cream Bronzer, and this is in the light shade that they have, which is called Seychelles, I guess it is. And in this case, this is a bronzer that's primarily based on silicone. I think it would be okay on my skin if it weren't on the neutral side, but it just really looks a little on the taupe side, and when I put it on my face, it just kind of makes it look on the muddy side. This line is not considered to be clean at Sephora, but these particular products, the ingredient list looks really good to me, and I haven't been bothered by the product when I've used it at all in terms of it annoying my face. But this is called Butter Biscuit, and it's from Fenty, and it's called Cheeks Out, and it's their cream bronzer. And as you can see, this is kind of on the taupe side. Now this line has a bronzer that's considered to be a lighter, which is a contour, so I think that's called Amber, so I'm not using that one. And then this one is supposed to be for lighter complexions, but for me, I don't think that it worked at all. I think it just made me look quite fake. And then there's another one that's darker, that's called Macchiato, which is warmer, which I thought looked a little better for me if I used it with a lot of restraint when I tried it in the Sephora store. But in general, even though I'm really open to the idea of trying out this bronzer, and it seemed to perform pretty well for me. In terms of my skin tone, I just don't think it worked very well for me at all. But for your skin tone, it might work great. Now this is a line from an independent makeup artist from New York. It's called Salt New York. She sells these palettes, and then she sells these individual little makeup squares that you can put in the palette and make your own little combination. So the one that I have here is the Salt New York Sculpt and Bronze Cream Tint Pro in the shade Light. And this one's not terrible on my skin, but again, I think it's too much on the neutral side for me to be able to use successfully. Unfortunately, that one has not worked out for me, even though I think the product's not too bad. It's a little bit, it has clay in it, so I don't feel like it spreads as easily as some products. I feel like it's a little more stiff. So that's another reason that I haven't used this very much. But I think that if you had the right color skin, it might work really well for you. Now, there have been a few other bronzers that I have purchased and that haven't worked for me because they've been too neutral. And so I've sent them off to a friend of mine. But one of those was the Han bronzer. So I just showed you a Han blush, but the Han bronzer I purchased in the shade Malibu, which is described as a matte milk chocolate bronzer for a healthy looking tan. It can also be used to contour to give dimension. I don't feel like milk chocolate was exactly the right description of it. I thought that it was quite neutral. It wasn't real dark. It didn't really work for me at all. But for someone with more neutral skin, it might work fine. They also have a darker shade with the name Ibiza. That looks a little more peachy in the photos, and I do like the Han formula, which is very similar to the blush formula. But again, I'm not sure that if it's going to work on me, and if I can't try it out, then becomes a little bit of a challenge. A second group of bronzers that I've tried are the Bobbi Brown bronzers. And Bobbi Brown is the original company that was founded by the head of Jones Road. And so she really knows something about powder bronzers, because this was one of the more popular products that Bobbi Brown has. In this case, though, the Bobbi Brown bronzers tend to be on the neutral side in my experience. And they also tend to be kind of on the overly dark side. So the lightest shade that they offer in their regular non-shimmery bronzers is called Golden Light, and that's called a light tan. And I found that to be too dark for me, and also to be too neutral for me. That product also has some talc in it and some other problematic ingredients. I felt that one actually was slightly irritating to my face. Another product that I tried that was way too neutral for me was the lightest shade of the Saie Sun Melt. I think it was, a nice product to use, but it really didn't work for me at all, and I did give that one away. So now let's talk a little bit about bronzers that are on the more yellow side compared to the peach bronzers that have worked for me. Now, for instance, the bronzer that we have at the top here, this is the Merit Bronze Balm in the shade Quince. And this is a shade that I feel has worked somewhat well for me, but it's really only because it goes on the skin very, very sheer. So if I put this on like this, it's very easy for me to sheer it out. So it's basically almost disappears on my skin. The one that's the next darkest is the shade Clay, I believe, and that one, when I've tried it in the Sephora store, it looks a little bit neutral. So again, this is a bronzer that even though it seems like I should be able to find a good shade in it, and even though I really like the formula, I don't know that there's really a good one for me. But if you're looking for a shade that's more neutral or more yellow, this could be a good one for you. This is the shade from Ilia called Drawn In, and it's called the Night Light Bronzing Powder. And this one, compared to the Clinique version or the Westman Atelier one, it looks a lot more neutral. So it's kind of right smack in the middle of all of the different colors. It's not too yellow, it's not too neutral, it's not too red, it's not too green, it's not too orange, it's not too peach. So if you want something that's right in the middle, then this could be a really good shade for you. For me, I feel like it's not too bad on my skin. I can get away with it, but I don't feel that it's the ideal skin. Choosing a darker shade in a foundation might actually be a good idea and might work for you, but it's a little more difficult than you might think, and you might really need to be trying some of these on before making a decision. This is a very nice foundation stick that I have really liked in my own color. The color that works best for me seems to be warm ivory, and so this particular shade that I ended up trying out that I thought would be a darker shade of that I could use as a bronzer is called Warm Honey. As it turns out, this is way too yellow for me. So what I really need to be doing, I think, is looking for something that's peach, rather than something that's yellow. And so that didn't work all that well for me. And again, in this Mineral Fusion, this is a pressed powder color. This is a shade called Warm 4. So again, I think it's too yellow for me. It's not quite as extreme as the Bobbi Brown, but I think it is too yellow for me to work as an ideal bronzer for my skin. Now on this next slide here, I have put bronzers that I think are on the yellowish side or maybe the yellowish orange side that might be appropriate for some people, particularly if they have a somewhat darker skin or somewhat of a more yellowish skin, but that probably may be considered to be on the orange side for many people, including me. So the first one here that we have is the Sun Melt Saie bronzer in the color medium bronze. And this is, I think, a little bit on the just too dark, too orange, too yellow. It hasn't worked for me. I wish that I could get it to work. Now, Well People has these stick bronzers, and they have 4 different colors, and they really don't show very well at all online what those colors are. And I haven't found anywhere that's an actual store to go in and swatch these bronzers, so that was very frustrating for me. I ended up thinking that the 2 lighter shades looked like they were way too neutral for me. I ended up buying a golden bronze, which turned out to be quite yellow, so I haven't been able to use that either. This one is the Clinique Chubby Stick Sculpting Contour. This only comes in 1 color. I'm surprised at how orange it is. The good thing about this is that if I use it like this on my neck, say, and then I try to blend it in, it does disappear really fast. So that's one reason that I think that it does make it appropriate as a contour. Now, I'm not a big person that likes contour anyway. I kind of hate the way the Kardashians look in terms of the fake hollows on the skin. And I don't really, appreciate contouring in general, so I don't really use that. But sometimes I might use something on my neck just to make it a little darker. And I think that in this case, it does smudge out very easily. But on the other hand, it really, even on my neck, it looks pretty orange. So I wouldn't use this one. I'm not sure who this would be best for. Maybe someone with a slightly darker skin tone that leans yellow, but that's a very small group of the market for them to be only offering 1 contour. So I would think most people are probably not going to be able to use this one very well. The other one that we have listed here is the Vapour bronzing stick. Now this one is also out of production, so I'm not going to talk about that very much, but you can compare that to the Jones Road product that I have. It's sort of in the same color family, but I think the Jones Road one is definitely on the more reddish side, and it also doesn't have that metallic sheen that the Vapour one does. So the next group of bronzers that we have here are bronzers that I think are probably designed for people that have very pale skin tones and that don't want to have a bronzer that's going to be showing up very much at all on their skin. So one of the ones that we have here is from Haus Labs, and this is called the Power Sculpt Velvet Bronzer in the shade Light Level 1. They're calling this a warm bronzer, but in reality, when we swatch it, it doesn't really look yellow. It doesn't look peach. It really looks like kind of a muddy brown. So when Haus is talking about something with a lot of yellow in it, then they're calling that cool. And if they're talking about something that has a lot of red in it, then they tend to call that warm. So that's a little confusing. In this case, I purchased this bronzer back before I realized that that was how they were defining those words, and also when I thought that a warm shade would be good for me. This is such a sheer bronzer that I have been able to wear it, but I don't think it's the ideal shade for me. They do make quite a lot of different shades, so it may be the case that maybe one of their other light shades would work really well for me, and I really do like this formula. It goes on really easily and sheerly. So I think if it were the right color, it could be terrific. So I think I'm going to have to go and experiment more at the Sephora store. Now this one is from Mineral Fusion, and it's called the Blonzer Duo. This is their lighter shade. And so the pink shade here I'll talk about in a few seconds, but the shade here that's more on the beigey peach shade, I don't think this is necessarily a shade that would be bad for me, but it's just such a sheer and light shade that I don't think it's really doing anything for me at all when I use it. I think what I need to do is to send this to a friend of mine who has very pale skin and who usually finds that other bronzers are too dark for her, because maybe it would work for her really well. Now this bronzer, this is from Victoria Beckham, and it was tremendously expensive, even though I bought it on sale. But you know, this bronzer, so it's supposed to have a shade here that's a bronzer, and then this one is supposed to be a contour. And I have personally found that both of these are not working very well for me. For one thing, they don't pick up very much of the product on the brush. And so if you're looking for something that's really, really light, maybe if you do have very pale skin, maybe this would be great for you. What I have started to use this particular palette for is as an eyeshadow. It looks pretty natural looking, and doesn't draw all the attention away from my eyes themselves. It more makes the top part of the eyelid part of my eyes recede a little bit, so that my eyes look like they're a little bit more prominent. So I think that that's good. So I might use this, continue to use this on an everyday basis as an eyeshadow that looks totally natural. I would probably get like 10 or 20 years out of this if I used it every day because it's so large, but at least I feel like I'm getting a little bit of use out of it. This next group of bronzers I think is quite similar in terms of undertone to the Jones Road Light Tan Bronzer. And these are all bronzers that I would consider to be a kind of a neutral, ruddy type of a blush. So we're moving towards, again, that Georgia clay type color where it's a rich brown, but not too aggressive. It's obviously has a reddishness to it, but not necessarily something that you would consider to be bright, obviously. So for instance, at the top here, we have one that's called the Bobbi bronzer, which this is a little palette from RMS, and the Bobbi bronzer is on the top row there. So it's pretty brown. It looks quite brown in the tub, but that when you put it on your skin, it definitely has a reddishness to it, and it gives kind of a healthiness to it. So it looks really neutral. It doesn't look like you're probably wearing blush at all, but it gives kind of a healthy flush to the skin. And then this product, which is the RMS Beauty Master Radiance Base, and it's more like a gel highlighter. So it's something that if you have dark skin, that you might put over your entire face to give your face just a little bit more of a glow to it. But for me, I've used tiny little bits of this and just as more of a highlighter type shade. And I think this has worked really well for me. It's much more sheer than the highlighter would be. So I think it's worked very nicely for me. This is from Westman Atelier, and it is from their, I guess it's called Face Trace Contour Stick. This one is designed for medium skin, and this is in the shade Truffle. And the Truffle shade has a little bit of reddishness to it, and it also has this sort of a brownish color. So it seems very similar, I think, to the Bobbi bronzer, and also, in terms of the undertone, to the Jones Road product. And I actually saw a whole video with Gucci Westman of Westman Atelier, where she was supposed to be introducing her new foundation, but she spent most of the video trying this bronzer on, and trying this contour product on her own light skin and showing how it could be used as a bronzer, and then all of her team members did it, and it did all look pretty on them, but they were really only using it like they would a blush. So again, you're not going to be using something like this all over your whole face unless you really have a reddish undertone. It's really supposed to be more like a neutral blush. And then this product, this is from Rituel de Fille. I think this is almost exactly the same color, and this is a very popular color for them. This is called Eros, and it's called the Inner Glow Cream Pigment. So they are selling this for use either as a eyeshadow or as a blush or as a lip product, or because it's neutral, you could be using it as a bronzer, but they're not intending for you to use it over the entire face. It's designed to add some dimension and some neutral color to the face. And Rituel de Fille does a really nice job with colors, and this is a very nice product to use as well. So if you like those colors and you're looking for something in a powder version, then that could mean that this Jones Road one could be great for you. Okay, here's a few more products from popular lines. So this is Well People, and this is their powder bronzer, and they're calling this the Super Powder Bronzing Powder, and the shade that I have is called Golden Hour, and it is I don't think it's quite as reddish as the Jones Road, but it's kind of getting on the same line, and it's I don't think that this has been as enjoyable for me to use as some of the other powder products. It doesn't pick up all that well on the brush. I have to really work at it to get any color to show up on my skin at all. It's actually not in the pan like accurately. It's kind of like over to one side, so I feel like they're charging a little bit of too much money for a product that's not all that well put together. But in general, I think that if you have this product, this is kind of on the more neutral type of a color than the Jones Road one. It's not going to be giving you quite as much of a reddishness to it. And I think that's also the case with these two Kosas products. Now, Kosas makes a line of blush in terms of powder blush and cream blush. And in each of these lines, they have a product that's supposed to be kind of like a bronzy blush. So again, it's like this overlap between bronzers and blush. And the cream one is called Tropic Equinox, and the powder one is called Contra Chroma. And these are both, they're sort of terracotta. So I think that they're pretty much the same shade as my skin, but they're considerably darker. Now in the next slide, you can see a few more bronzers that have a bit of a reddish undertone. The first one that we have here is from RMS Beauty, and this one is called the Madeira Bronzer. Now this one is actually designed to be almost the exact same color as the Buriti bronzer, except it's in powder form. This one seems to no longer be manufactured. I think that the Jones Road one is a nicer powder. It goes on more easily. I think it may be more finely milled. So I think that if you really liked this Madeira bronzer, that the Jones Road one could be a good one to consider instead. This Dusk Reflection from Honest. This was a powder that was designed to be a pressed powder for dark skin, but that was promoted by them and that was used by a lot of people, again, as a powder bronzer. I don't think they're making that one anymore, but if you have that in your collection, I think this is a fairly close shade to the Jones Road one, maybe just not quite as red, but pretty close. And then actually this contour shade in the Victoria Beckham one, this one has a little bit of reddishness to it, but I don't think it's nearly as red as the Jones Road one, and so I don't really consider it to be a substitute. It's also, as I said before, I don't think that the powder quality in terms of putting it on the skin is as good as the Jones Road. So now we have some bronzers that fall into the pink family. So as I said before, the lightest shade of the new line of Jones Road bronzers is a muted pink color, or a tawny pink color. And this is something that Bobbi Brown also delved into a little bit when she was at her old company, which is the Bobbi Brown makeup line, which is now just run by Estee Lauder. This is a shade called Antigua, and it is, I think, designed to mimic a sunburn. So it's actually not a bad color for me if I want to look a little bit sunburned, if I don't use too much of it. This lighter shade of the Mineral Fusion and the Blonzer that I showed you before, I think that this one could be also mimic a little bit of a sunburn, and that's what it's trying to do. So again, for a really light skin tone, that could be a good thing. This product, which is from Ilia, this is called Summertime, and it looks like it's bronze when you have it in the container, but when I put it on my skin, it actually looked much more pink. And actually quite pretty in terms of it being pink. They're not making it anymore, but if you have that one, then you can compare that one to the Jones Road Light Tan, which is obviously much more muted and a little bit more on the reddish type side rather than pink. And then the one that I actually really like, that's one of my favorites, this is from Westman Atelier. And this is in the shade Brûlée. And it's a glossy bronzing highlighter that's supposed to create kind of like a glass skin. So I'll put a little bit of this on right now. And you can see how it's almost the same color as the Jones Road one, but it just makes my skin look a little bit more shiny and a little bit more glossy. And I think that that's an attractive look. This is an expensive product. It is sold in a smaller container, but I had the other version of this highlighter that I purchased sort of like melt on me in the container in the little version. So I'm not sure if I'm going to buy any more of those little ones. I'm not sure that they were made very well. But I do really like the way that this highlighter looks on my face, especially in combination with the Clinique or the Westman Atelier Butter Bronzer. So personally, I feel like in the future I would splurge for this one because that's the one that I've been using the most. But it really depends on what you're looking for. If you're looking for something that's much more matte, but in the same color family, then the Jones Road one could be perfect for you. Okay, so now I have a couple more assorted bronzers that are in the shade that's a little similar to the Jones Road one. So the first one that we have here, swatched on my hand, the one that we have at the top is one from Bare Minerals, which is called Warmth. So this is a loose powder bronzer, and it's actually pretty popular, especially if you consider how messy this is. So this comes in this little jar, and it's just loose, highly pigmented powder. I have spilled this in my house several times and made a big mess out of it. But I think it's very interesting that the shade of it is quite close to the Jones Road bronzer in the shade Light Tan, which I have swatched on my wrist. So I think that's not really an accident. I think that is a popular shade, and so I'm kind of happy that there's a version of it that is not in that loose powder form. Now the second one that we have swatched here, this is actually another Jones Road product in their lip and cheek stick line, and the shade is called Chocolate Mocha. And I had thought when I first saw this shade online that it was really designed for people with darker skin, but then last year Bobbi Brown was shown demonstrating it by putting it on her own skin and suggesting that it was a bronzer and that it was giving her a little bit of warmth to her skin in the middle of winter. So I put some of this on my cheeks, I put some of it on my lips, and I think this is a very pretty shade. It's not exactly the same shade as the new powder bronzer in the shade Light Tan. This one seems like it's a little bit more of a dark terracotta, which is actually a good thing for me. So I've actually gotten a fair amount of use out of this one, and I do like it a lot. And then at the bottom here, we have the, this is from Burt's Bees, and they're calling it a bronzer stick. And this is in this is called All Aglow, and it's in the shade Bronze Splash. So this is quite yellow, and it also is kind of shimmery, and I honestly am not sure who that would be a really good shade for. I don't think it works for me at all, but there must be someone out there that can wear it if they're making it and selling it. So the next group of bronzers that we have are on the shimmery side, and they're fairly light. I would suggest that they're more like a dark champagne or a very almost a neutral peach, but shimmery. The one by Kosas is a light shade. It's quite shimmery, and it goes on my skin mostly looking like a highlighter. However, there's a darker version of this one that is very similar, I think, to the Clinique bronzer. This is out of stock at present, so I don't know if they're going to be selling it or not, but I'm interested in getting this one if it does come back into stock, because I think it might be a really good shade for me. This is from Tower 28. This is from their Bronzino line, so this is their lightest bronzer in that line, and this is called Suncoast. And this is very similar, I think, to the Kosas bronzer and to these other two RMS products. Now, these are called highlighters, but the Master Mixer from RMS, this is one of my favorite products. And whenever I put this on my skin, I feel like my skin actually looks quite a lot better. It's almost the same color as my skin, but it just gives it a little bit of a glow to it that I think makes me look a little bit healthier and just draws a little bit of attention. And then this product is kind of based on the RMS Master Mixer color, so it's like a gel. So you can put it all over your face, or you can use it as a highlight. And it's a little thinner and it's easier to use. So I've used quite a bit of this so far. And then this last group of bronzers or bronzing highlighters, these all turned out to be exactly the same color, which I had no idea about when I purchased them. The first one, which I think I purchased first, is from a company called Chantecaille. And this is called the Sunbeam Cheek and Eye Shade in the shade Ray. And so the idea here is that it's they're promoting it as being sort of a sunny type of a product. It comes with this little carved flower on it. It's tremendously expensive, especially since it just comes in this plastic case. It's pretty on my skin, but I haven't been able to use it on my eyes at all because it irritates them. Then I got this bronzer from a company called RMS Beauty. So this is a palette. You can put in 4 different cheek shades into it. So this one here is the shade M51, which is rose gold. And I think that this performs exactly the same as that Chantecaille, except it only costs $28, including a case. So I think that's a really good deal. I actually like this formula better in terms of how easily it goes onto the skin. And it does not have that flower on it, but I can certainly use it on my eyes without irritating my eyes. So I'm really enthusiastic about this brand, RMS Beauty, and I'd like to do a whole video on them soon. Now the third one is from Westman Atelier, and this is also quite expensive. But this is it's called Super Loaded Tinted Highlighters, and they come in these pretty cases. And this is the shade Peau de Pêche. So there are 4 shades, and this one I think is very nice for my skin, but it really is exactly the same shade as that Chantecaille or the RMS Beauty one. I like this one more because I think I just like cream products usually more. But in any case, I don't think you need all 3 of these, and I will try hard to use them up because they are very pretty. So thank you very much for watching the whole video, and I hope that you will share information about what some of your favorite bronzers are, or about what your skin undertone is and which colors of bronzers have worked well for you, so that we can all learn from one another's experiences. Again, if you want to read more details about bronzers, then you can go to my website, which is at www.livingclean.info. All right, well, thank you very much for watching, and if you've enjoyed this video, then please subscribe to my YouTube channel. And Coco and I love you very much. Say goodbye. Look at the camera. Oh, look at the camera. You are so stubborn. Bye-bye.